And you are all set.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'd like to wish you all a very warm welcome from the Centre for Behaviour Analysis at Queen's University. And we are so delighted to welcome Dr. Janet Twyman as our third speaker for the 2021 seminar series. Dr. Twyman is the founder of the learning sciences company Blast, and she's an esteemed contributor to research and practice in evidence-based education. So it's a real privilege to have her here with us this evening, albeit virtually. Janet is in quite a rural area and has had some concerns about her internet connection, but we've put a couple of things in place that will hopefully counteract that, and we'll get to enjoy Janet's talk in full, I hope. So without further ado, I am just going to pass you over to Janet. Enjoy the talk.
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Catherine, and thank you, Carola, and Queen's Belfast for inviting me. I'm really excited to be a part of this and share with you guys some things about designing instruction. A lot of things you may know, hopefully some other things to give you food for thought. And I also just want to give a shout out to Chris at BehaviorLive. This has just been such a tremendous resource for behavior analysts to be able to share information and research in their craft. And so thanks, Chris, for making this possible for all of us. So as Catherine said, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and jump into the topic, and it's specifically about example sequencing. When we're teaching, how do we determine first what examples we use, and then second, what order do we present them in? And that little subtitle, that beyond reaching into the bin, is a little bit of a throwback to my history. Easily, gosh, I hate to date myself, but easily 30 years ago, or about 30 years ago, I used to teach and then later run a behavior analytic special needs preschool called the Fred Keller School. And we used to do a lot of discrete trial instruction, sitting at the table one-to-one, and we would have a bin, kind of like what's in this picture, a bin full of objects, and it was just toys and things that we found, and I don't know, buttons and whatever we could find, and we would use those when we were trying to teach anything like shapes or colors or whatever concept we were trying to teach. We would just reach into the bin. I don't know if any of you guys have that same experience, if you might be doing similar types of things, but I'm here to talk about maybe there's just a little bit better way to do this than just, we don't want to just reach into the bin. So, ideal instruction. The reason that we don't want to just reach into the bin is we want to provide the most effective, the most efficacious, and enjoyable experience for our learners. So ideal instruction, we know that all children can be taught. If we can arrange the instructional contingencies, all children can be taught. We also know that all teachers can succeed, right? Given the proper tools, the proper training, the proper analytical skills, all teachers can succeed at teaching all children. We do know, however, that some learners require to learn, they need to learn more faster, they need a little bit more finesse in how they're taught or how the instructional sequences are arranged. And because of that, we know that the details of instruction must be exact. As we know that popular saying, the devil is in the details, it's true for many things in life, including arranging our instructional sequence. So what we're going to do is delve into the details of instruction. The primary source of this talk is a wonderful, wonderful book. Some people say it's very heavy reading. I think if you love instructional design and you like thinking about concepts, it's just a wonderful read, but it's Theory of Instruction by Zig Engelman and Doug Carnine. Actually, there's a URL at the bottom, the NIFDI, National Institute for Direct Instruction.org. If you actually go to that website, they sell, and I'm sorry that I'm going to have to name a price, but it's incredibly reasonable. I think it's like $10. They sell an online version of this huge book, which I should probably grab it off my shelf so you guys can see. just a phenomenal resource. So if you're interested in this kind of stuff, I recommend that you perhaps get either a hardcover copy or an electronic copy of Theory of Instruction. And I'm going to give you guys a little teaser about some of the gems that are in this book. So how do we design instruction? Well, within this book, Theory of Instruction, there's this premise. It's actually not just a premise, it's one of the foundational cornerstones of thinking about instruction by Engelman and Carnine. And it has to do with something called faultless communication. So they define faultless communication as a sequence of instruction involving examples and non-examples in a logical, well-crafted order. So it's the order of how we present our examples and our non-examples that leads to accurate understanding of the concept, that leads to learning. So that's what we're going to focus on. For the teacher needs to develop that logical sequence through examples and non-examples, and that's going to result in the learner having accurate understanding without confusion. And this is the critical piece. I'm sure not in any of the places that you guys teach or work or provide therapy, but I have seen a few examples where programs go on for a long, long time, and there are lots of errors, and errors not just at first, but errors throughout the program, or a lot of what we call ineffective or inaccurate stimulus control because learners are responding to different contingencies and different dimensions of the stimuli. We can prevent all of that through good instruction. We can prevent all of that trial and tribulation for our learners. So here's an example, right? Because instruction, English language, communication is riddled with confusion. So here's a sentence. I saw a man on a hill with a telescope. How many ways can this sentence be interpreted? Go ahead and say a few different things in your head about what this sentence might mean. And if you don't mind, go ahead and type in the chat how many different ways you think this sentence could be interpreted. I saw a man on a hill with a telescope. And I'll wait a couple minutes. Go ahead and think, and then how many different ways could you interpret that sentence? And you guys, I really like interactivity, so I'm waiting to see some things pop up in the chat. Oh, good, thank you. Thanks. I can't quite see the names, but all of you guys typing in at least two, some thoughts, typing in some examples. There was a man on the hill and he was using a telescope, or on a hill that also had a telescope. Really good. Well, actually, there are at least, let me get over here. There are at least 5 different ways the sentence can be interpreted. And some of you guys typed into the chat some of these meanings. There was a man on a hill that also had a telescope on it. One might be really, really crazy, but we could interpret it with these words. There's a man on a hill, and I'm sawing him with a telescope, right? One phrase, one sentence, at least 4, maybe 5 plausible interpretations. Well, the same thing happens in instruction. The same thing happens when we're teaching learners, right? Typical instruction for many learners, especially on a new concept, it's riddled with confusion and ambiguity. And we can change that for our learners. We can make it better. We can reduce the confusion. Okay? Oh, and there's an attendance check. Nice pop-up of good stimulus control for me, at least, that nice big red thing. So Hey, can you guys hear me now?
Got you.
Good. Chris, I don't even touch my phone, and the call just ended. I don't know. It's always gonna. Anyway. So, and I am reading some of the chat that did I see somewhere that somebody said things keep freezing? Are we doing okay, or should we?
Yeah, everything's fine.
Okay, great. All right, so I'm going to continue. Welcome back, everyone, or back to me. So we were talking about instruction being riddled with confusion, and there's a lot of ambiguity in instruction for learners. So what we want to do is focus on the ideal instruction, making it as faultless or as pristine as possible. And these are the building blocks of direct instruction, a way of teaching invented and honed and crafted by Siegfried and Engelman and colleagues. But basically, if we use this faultless communication, we can improve any and all teaching. So how do we do it? How do we create faultless communication? Well, we do this by doing a logical analysis of the stimuli. Because no matter what we're teaching, we're using stimuli when we teach, and we build contingencies around those stimuli. So in order to make it faultless, we need to start with a logical analysis. Okay? So these critical features of faultless communication, and I'm going to do something I don't necessarily like to do, but I'm going to give you a list, but then we're going to deconstruct, or we're going to go through that list step by step. So the very first thing that you do for this logical analysis to build faultless communication is determine a set of examples that are the same. So you want your examples to be the same with respect to only one distinguishing quality. The examples are the same based on one distinguishing quality. Again, we're going to unpack that. So here's an example. Here's a foreign word, maybe unfamiliar to most of you. Some of you might be familiar with this word. Anyway, here's a word, and all of these examples represent this word, all the examples on the table. And they're all the same with respect to one distinguishing quality. And you don't type in the chat or anything what that quality is, because I'm going to ask you about that later. So let's first go through those critical features of faultless communication. So these examples are the same with respect to one quality. Then when we're teaching, we need to provide two examples. Either the example possesses the quality or it does not. So in my PowerPoint version, if it possesses the quality, it's going to be on a white background, and that means it does have that quality. If it does not possess that quality, it's going to be on a gray background. Okay, so white background is UConn, gray background is not UConn. So that's the second principle, providing that signal. The third principle is that when you have that positive quality, that positive exemplar, you want to demonstrate a range of variation. So all of these are positive examples. They're all white backgrounds, meaning they represent UCAN. Okay? So go ahead and look at them. So the third feature is demonstrating that range of positive quality. The fourth feature to create faultless communication is you illustrate the limits of the variation by adding in some negative examples. And I know some folks are typing in the chat what they think it means. I'm going to ask you that in a moment, so don't worry about typing that now. Just look at the examples and non-examples and see how the gray examples, the ones in the gray background, the non-examples, share some features with the examples, but they're missing that critical feature. Okay? And I know folks mentioned that they missed the first check-in. I think there are 4, and you have to get 3 out of 4. And as Chris said, he'll help folks with these. All right, so the fourth feature is that we want to show the limits of the variation with negative examples. Fifth feature is that you want to test for generalization with no examples. So I'm going to go back up. Here are examples of UCAN. Here are examples and non-examples. Okay, let's go to the test. The very first one, the first one on the left, I should have numbered these. Does that represent UCAN? If you can type in the chat, yes or no. Is that UCAN, the very first one, yes or no? Good job, I love you guys responding. I'm gonna move on. The second one, UCAN, yes or no? Given the example shown and the range of non-examples. The third one, UCAN, yes or no? The fourth one, UCAN, yes or no? That one might be tough for folks. The fifth one, UCAN, yes or no? Okay, so you guys know how you responded. I'm gonna go back and just show you these examples, right? And go ahead, I think, go ahead and type in the chat what, or actually I showed you the answer. UCAN actually means flying. Some of you guys guessed that earlier. And the white examples are that generalization test of flying versus not flying. So the first one, the helicopter's up in the air, it's moving based on its own volition or some form of being propelled. The second one is a great test because it has wings. And often we associate wings with flying, but it's not up in the air, or it's not moving, so it's not flying. The spaceship is flying. Even on a broom, she's actually moving through the air. Those little symbols are supposed to show that she's up in the air moving. And even though we can say a car flies because it's going super fast, this is actually not representing an instance of flying. Right? So again, we're showing critical and variable attributes, and we're going to go into that, of what we're trying to teach. So I'm going to go over those again, those 5 features of faultless communication. But I wanted to share with you that it all has to do with understanding critical and variable attributes. It all has to do with how we understand concepts. So in the journal Perspectives on Behavior Science, Dr. TV Joe Lang has a great article, a tutorial on how to understand concepts, how to build concepts, and content analysis, how to choose examples and non-examples, and how to control for critical and variable attributes. It's just a great resource, also available online. So to learn more about that aspect of it, definitely check out Joe's article. Okay. So how do we do it? So in other words, what do we mean when we're saying these 5 pieces of faultless communication, critical and variable attributes to build a concept? But what we mean is that you have to analyze both your concept, what does it really mean, and your stimuli, and not just your examples, but your non-examples, okay? And I will provide you with a link at the end of the talk where all of these slides will be available. I don't do it ahead of time because I want some of it to be fresh so that I can test your guys' acquisition and participation in the thing, but I will provide a link at the end where all the slides are available. Okay, so we want to analyze our concept, and we want to analyze our examples and non-examples. Okay. So how does one take a concept analysis and determine the most logical sequence? How do we know when to present examples and non-examples, and what examples and non-examples to present?
Hey,
I'm
Janet.
back. I'm so sorry.
So what if, hey, Janet?
Janet Lopez, like, Janet! Look, you're called off again. Do you all want to tell me where it might have dropped, what we were talking about?
You stopped almost immediately. I will say your video quality is really good right now, so I don't know if you just want to use the built-in audio. I don't know if you want to keep doing this. It seems to be working fine even when it drops. We're getting you back real quick, so up to you.
All right, let's try the video audio. Okay.
Okay. Cool.
All right,
All right, I just turned the audio on, and I'm going to mute myself on the phone for a second.
Perfect.
How's this?
Great.
Okay, awesome. All right, let me just, I got to turn. I'm not going to hang them up just in case. All right. So,
Okay.
Chris, I'm sorry. Did you say that we lost audio almost immediately from the last one?
Yeah, no. You got right back immediately. So I don't think there was much of a gap. Like as soon as you saw the chat, you jumped back in.
Actually, I had to turn up my volume to hear you. Could you repeat that?
I was saying we didn't miss hardly anything. As soon as you dropped off, you saw the chat and you came right back. So it was fine.
Good. Okay, good. Thanks. Okay, thanks. Okay, so the concept that I want you guys to think about, or the new term that I'm introducing, new to some folks, is this concept of this term around juxtaposition. And it has to do with the sequence or the order in which we present things. Or basically when two things are side by side for comparison, they're done to highlight or contrast those elements. And folks, we check. Position. This is a tool that we want in our toolbox when we think about how we're presenting our stimuli. So let me get back over here. Now it should, hold on. All right. So juxtaposition helps us sequence our examples. It gives us another 5 principles for sequencing and ordering examples in order to communicate clearly. And this is one of the big takeaways, this thought about how we present our examples, the order in which we present our examples. So again, here's the list: wording, setup, difference, sameness, testing. Okay. But we're going to go back through and figure out what each one of those means. The wording principle. So this is the first principle of juxtaposition, the wording principle. To make the sequence of examples as clear as possible, use the same example, same wording across examples. So you're going to use the same wording across positive examples, or as close as possible. What do I mean by that? We're going to say dog and not dog. So again, the same wording, it's dog, and then the non-example is not dog, right? We're not going to say dog and not pooch, right? We're not going to change the word. We're not going to say canine and not dog. We're not going to say dog and cat or some other animal. We're going to use as close as possible that same wording. So that is the wording principle. Quite simple. Just use your same or similar wording across your examples. Examples and non-examples. We're not going to say dog and cat. Okay? The second principle is the setup principle. Minimize the number of examples needed to demonstrate a concept. We want to be as efficient as possible in our teaching. So to minimize the number of examples needed, you have to juxtapose or compare examples that share the greatest number of features. So when you set it up, you want examples that share features. What do we mean? Okay. We have dog and not dog. And if you look at those examples, both animals, the dog and the not dog, are facing forward. They're sitting with their legs up front. They have a tail off to the side. And so all of those features that have nothing to do with dogmas or not dogmas are shared across pictures. So that's an example of the setup principle, these shared features. Non-example. If I want to do dog and then have a non-example, I'm not going to have a purple cat with a black outline. There are too many things that are different, so we don't know what to pay attention to. We don't know the dogmas of the comparison. Okay? We're going to go into this a little bit more detail with the third principle. So we had the wording principle, the setup principle, and now we have the difference principle. So we need to be able to show differences between our examples. So we need to juxtapose or compare examples that are minimally different and then treat them differently. So again, the way to understand this is through actually looking at it. So here we have dog and not dog. Again, trying to focus on similarities, blue background, face silhouette. If I could have found a picture with both of their tails up or tails down, I would have done that. So again, that the only difference between dog and not dog is the dog of stimuli. Okay? So we don't want to do dog and not dog, and the horse is going the other way, it has a rider, it's a different color, no background. Again, because we're not helping the learner know what the critical features are. And this always kind of goes back to that first, a man on the hill with a telescope. We want to be as clear as possible in our communication to the learner. So we only want the differences to be the dogness versus the not dogness. And you want to show examples that are minimally different and just treat those examples differently. So fourth, then the sameness principle. You can almost think about this as extension. We want to juxtapose or contrast examples that are greatly different and show how they're the same. This is where we're building towards, like I said, extension or generalization. We're extending the class. Dog. All of these are examples of dog, whether it's a cartoon, whether it's a picture, whether it's the full body, whether it's the head, whether it's in silhouette, face on, whatever it may be. All of these share the critical feature of dog, but they're widely varied in terms of their non-critical features, the background, their orientation, right? But we call them, all of them, dog. That's part of the sameness principle. We apply that to our non-examples, the not dog. So again, here are all these examples that are not dogs. Some are pictures, some are silhouettes, some are line drawings, face forward, sideways. So we want to treat them all the same way. All of these, regardless of all of these irrelevant characteristics, they're not dog. And if I go back and forth between the two, you can see I actually tried to control for similarities. Like that fifth picture from the left is a black outline, just like on the non-example, a black outline. So we're trying to share similarities. We're trying to greatly show that there's some differences and that those differences have nothing to do with the dogness of the image, right? And just to let folks know, I'm going to go back again for dog versus not dog. I know these are upside down to you. I wanted to show this from the learner's perspective. So that's why all those photographs are upside down, because our learner is scanning these pictures and seeing all of these shared characteristics of dog, the dogness, and all of these variations of not dog. And then we do the same thing, we test. So to test whether or not a concept's been learned, we always, always, always have to use novel examples and non-examples. And not just novel examples. You've got to include novel non-examples as well. So here's an example of the test. We've not seen any of these pictures before. Which ones are dogs or not dogs? So basically, again, those are the 5 pieces of juxtaposition. And then when we are testing, we can test for either further extension. We can change the SD. Is this a dog? Point to dog. We can build in fluency as fast as you can. Point to all the dogs. We can turn it into an interverbal response. What is this? We can provide additional feedback and additional information in the feedback. Great, dogs bark. What do dogs do? Pick up all the ones that bark. All of these are extensions of that testing principle. And it's a way to, again, further test the concept. All right. So all of these are just critical pieces that we need to think about when we're designing instruction so that we're not just reaching into the bin. And it's important because it's more than just multiple exemplar training. You know what? When I was just reaching into the bin back in the day, pulling out things to teach red or shape or whatever it may be, I might have been doing some multiple exemplar training because I'm using many examples to represent what I'm trying to teach. But we're talking about more than that. We are carefully choosing the examples and the non-examples. We're carefully choosing their critical features and their variable features, and we're highlighting the differences. So this is what we're doing when we're thinking about juxtaposition to build faultless communication. We're highlighting those important differences. So just as a recap, the wording principle, you want to use similar wording across your examples and non-examples. When you set it up, you want the positive example to share as many features as possible. You want non-examples to be treated differently from non-examples, but to be very close in. We're going to get to that. We want a wide variation in our examples. And then, of course, we always have to test whether or not the concept is learned. Right? But still, that leaves us a little bit hanging when we're thinking about designing our instruction, designing our trial, designing our, even our naturalistic environment teaching, or whatever it may be, in situ, all of that. We still have to, what are examples or non-examples, and what are the sequences? How do we decide our stimulus sets in their order? Think to yourself, how do you decide what you're going to present next? And you may have a curriculum, but that may not identify exactly what all the examples are. It may even say present a dog, then a cat, then a dog, then a horse, then a horse, then a cat, then a dog. But it may not say which picture of a dog or which toy horse or things like that. So how do you decide? Well, in the field, in observing a lot of instruction, working with a lot of different educators, interventionists, therapists, behavior analysts, visiting a lot of schools, we either, it's ad hoc or unplanned. People don't necessarily identify ahead of time what stimuli they're going to use. Sometimes people grow and deltas and descriptive stimuli and the non-examples. Often, one as delta for different stimuli. We go through some sort of sequence of presenting SDs or presenting multiple SDs simultaneously. And then again, people talk about multiple exemplar training. But the problem with that literature is they don't identify what those multiple exemplars contain or not contain. So a good rule of thumb is to include at least 3 new targets. This is often heard in the literature and people's talking about how they teach. They say a good rule of thumb is to include at least 3 new targets at the start of training to reduce the likelihood of reinforcing correct responses under faulty stimulus control. So we have this kind of lore or this rule of thumb in our field that we typically start with 3 new targets. There's a little bit of research on that, not a lot of research. It's not necessarily unequivocal that the data say that this is what we do. And we are at our 3rd attendance check. So let's think rule of thumb, think about if that really does work. We're going to do an example. I know you don't know these, and these are nonsense words, and I've chose a stimuli to match this nonsense word. So you can just speak out loud to the computer. I also think you're crazy, but you can just, or you can identify which one you think is blurb. I'm going to teach you by providing a consequence to what it is that you're saying. So here's the first one. We're going to try it. Which one of these is blurb? Ready? So which one do you think is blurb? This one's blurb. Here's the next. Pumpkin. So I'm providing a correction procedure or maybe reinforcing for some of you guys. Reinforcing some. This one's Cree. You guys are all participating, right? So you're pointing to or saying which one you think is Cree. This one's Cree. Which one's Pumpkin? This one's Pumpkin. Which one's Cree? This one's Cree. So, which one's a blurb? I did 3 stimuli. I provided consequences. For some of you that had the right one, it might have been a reinforcing or confirmatory statement. For others, it might be a correction. Which one's blurb? Which one's Pimkin? Which one's Cree? Right? Imagine from the learner's perspective, 20 trials or more of this, of being presented with something, you don't know what you're supposed to attend to, you don't know, you get some confirmation or you get a prompt or you get something as a consequence. Would you learn all 3? Right? Could you possibly mislearn something? And equally important, was it fun? Was it easy to learn these? Probably not, right? That's what we do often when we choose 3 stimuli to present to our learners. We present all 3 at once, and we don't think about that whole principle of faultless communication and juxtaposition and how we present all of that. Okay? Yeah, you just don't know what to pay attention to. You don't know what are the critical attributes. So let's try it a little bit differently. I'm going to tell you this is a blurb. So go ahead and take a look at it. I'm going to go slowly because I don't know how audio, hopefully it's almost right on track. But this is a blurb. So this is a blurb. Blurb. Not blurb. Just to make sure we're on the same page. This is a blurb. Good, thanks. This is a blurb. This is not blurb. This is a blurb. This is not a blurb. So again, I'm just going to go back. This is a blurb, not blurb. Blurb, not blurb. Not blurb. And if needed, not blurb. So anybody that thinks that they're ready, or I encourage all answers. What do you think is a blurb? I love Michelle's answered. What do you think is a blurb? And I went back a couple times. So we might have had, what, 8 trials, 10 trials? Okay. Love thinking about this. And we could even present more trials. But here we go. Not blurb and blurb. Through 2 careful examples and 5 careful non-examples, most of you got heart and even. Right? Because it can't be read, because we first said, so we're just going to go back through these. So this is a blurb. So what do you notice about this? You notice it's red. You notice it's a heart. You notice it's a 6. You notice that it's even. Of course, you notice it's a card. Let's rule that out, that it's a playing card. So again, red, heart, even, red, heart, even. I thought I said something else. But anyway, so you notice all of those are potential blurb characteristics. But if I tell you this is not a blurb, all of a sudden, oh, not a blurb is not a heart, but it's odd. So even and red are still in play. So then we say that this is a blurb. Oh, what does it reaffirm? It's a heart, it's red, it's even. Well, we already know that heart can't be a blurb. Then here's a 6, so it's even, but it's not red. So now what we're doing is we're narrowing down through the careful selection and sequencing of our examples and non-examples, not a face card, to know what a blurb is. So again, just that careful sequencing of careful choosing and sequencing of examples and non-examples, that it's a heart and an even. We can get very effective and very efficient learning. And the fact is, the learner's errors let you know. So if they keep saying that the 6 of diamonds is a blurb, then that lets you know that the faulty stimulus control, or basically the misalignment of a critical feature, is a diamond versus heart. So it lets you know what to focus on, what to teach. So again, that careful selection and sequencing of examples and non-examples is an incredibly powerful tool to improve your instruction, clear communication, and let you know how your teaching is doing. Okay, and everybody is always curious at the end, what was a Pimpkin, because they had preconceived notions, and it was really just the smallest card out of the array of 3 cards. And the Cree was just a face card that was in a black color. Okay, all right. So faulty stimulus control, we talk a lot about this in the literature, and we spend a lot of time trying to eliminate faulty stimulus control. And that can be anything from inadvertent instructor cues, looking at the correct response, what you don't really mean to, putting it down last, looking with anticipation towards the right card. We can provide misleading wording or instructions, like sometimes our antecedent may be one way with the correct SD and a different way with a non-example. We do various things when we're observing how learners are responding. There's a lot of talk in the literature about irrelevant antecedent stimulus control. That can be anything from a bent corner on a card that every learner knows that that's the horse because it's got a bent corner. We worry about faulty stimulus control a lot. We worry about not counterbalancing, providing extra prompting, over-selectivity, which we talk about with our learners with autism a lot. All of this stuff, there's so much in the literature about faulty stimulus control. And why? Why is there so much in the literature? Because it happens a lot. Why really does it happen a lot? Probably because we don't spend a lot of time at the front end doing the critical and variable attribute analysis, that concept formation, and then applying these principles of juxtaposition to build faultless communication. If we did that, we would reduce faulty stimulus control. Right? We would be able to, learners would be able to very quickly, efficiently learn new concepts and generalize those concepts. Okay? Faulty stimulus control only means that there's a false inference between some feature of the stimuli, some key feature of the learning environment, and the target response. So in order to reduce it, it is essential, it's essential that the sets of examples and non-examples are carefully chosen and sequenced so that learners don't generate those false inferences. So all of this, as we mentioned, is in this wonderful book called Theory of Instruction. Again, it is available online from the National Institute for Direct Instruction, the URL at the bottom. This is just one small slice of the huge treasure trove of instructional strategies and thinking about the sequence of instruction that's available. And those of you that are researchers looking and interested in research, it's basically just, again, a treasure chest of different things that you can do research on with regard to how you present examples, the order, when you present non-examples, how many critical and variable attributes. It's just a treasure trove for folks that want to do more research into that level of instruction. So those areas of research, just to get you guys excited for that, some of them. You notice in the first example when we were doing Glurb, Pimpkin, and Cree, and I quoted that rule of thumb that says present 3 examples at once, 3 new stimuli at once. And I kind of did this tongue-in-cheek. Well, that's actually a little bit hard for the learner. It's actually not tongue-in-cheek because it is hard for the learner. When I retaught it, I used glurb and not glurb, right? So that's the effect of not for non-examples. We don't do that enough. Maybe we need a little bit more research convincing all of us as instructional designers and practitioners to use not when we're teaching new concepts. And that whole idea of a single versus multiple targets. And how close in versus far out should our comparisons be? We tend to go very far out with our non-examples with very few shared characteristics when we're introducing concepts to our learners. But again, it's like that picture of a dog versus that picture of a guy riding a horse. Well, it's so far out, it's so different, we don't know what to attend to. So we might be doing our learners a disservice if we go too far out with our non-examples. We had to think critically. Ooh, who just typed in discriminate before you operate? So true. Good job, Claire. yes, you need to make your own discriminations before you expect and try to teach your learners to do that. So in a way, great research areas: simultaneous versus sequential presentations. This is a teaser: continuous conversion versus rational sequencing. That's a whole talk unto itself. We're not going to go into that, but that's in that orange book. Phenomenal examples about how to do that. The importance of comparisons, so much more, right? And then that book has so many cool things that we didn't cover. Like, how do you broaden, how do you program for generalization? How do you program for extension? How do you broaden members of a set? Well, there are actually 3 critical procedures: interpolation, extrapolation, and stipulation. Those might be new to many of us, but they're known procedures, known in concept formation, that we probably don't apply to our teaching. Maybe some of them work better under some circumstances than others. It's another research area. This whole idea about generativity, how do we do the spontaneous contingency adduction of new skills? Well, we can do research, and how do we using these procedures, how do we program that to happen? Component composite, instructional protocols. Do we present examples and let learners formate a rule? That's called egg rule, where we present examples and they mentally, did I just say that word? Do they covertly formate a rule? Or do we provide a rule up front and then show examples that support it? Which one is the more effective procedure? Under what circumstances? How do we prime learning rather than prompt it? So these are all just cool things coming out of this book, out of this idea of instructional design that we didn't cover. Going back, tremendous areas of research. On this seminar, and also at Queen's Belfast University, there are great researchers that you can probably reach out and contact with that might want to do some of this work. Folks want to reach out to me and have me bounce some ideas off of me, or have me throw out some ideas myself about research. There are wonderful things that can be done. Please reach out. Let's build a community investigating these things. We have our 4th attendance check in the chat. There's cool things that we didn't cover. And then, as I promised, the slides are available at this URL. And maybe Chris or someone could also type that URL in the chat for me. That would be great. And I did want to save, and it looks like we have about 10 minutes, right? For questions or thoughts that folks had about this whirlwind kind of overview into sequencing, example sequencing, and instruction.
Thank you so much, Janet. That was brilliant. And I have to speak on behalf of everyone in saying that you handled those technical difficulties so seamlessly. Anyone else would have been just panicking completely. So can you see the questions, Janet, or do you want me to call some out to you?
Let me...
Questions box down there at the bottom.
Yeah, I'm gonna move. Yep, I just had to move my share little bar, and I see 4 questions. And yes, so if you're teaching early learners with autism, what if they do not understand what not is? How do you get them to understand this? Would you teach them this way? So Michelle, you are so right that before you can use not as a tool to teach other concepts, you have to teach the concept of not. You're exactly true. And I would start with a known or a preferred item. So whether it's a preferred manned or request item, or whether it's just something that they've already known and in TACT or speaker's own listener or receptive training, something that they know. And I would have, like, I'm just going to choose car. So I would say car, and then I would show them something. And again, you want to choose not car carefully. So I might choose bicycle, right? It shares a lot of critical features in that it's got wheels. It's something that you ride in. But then I would say not car, right? And then I might put them down and I might say point to car, reinforce, point to not car, and reinforce. Or I might hold it up and ask, either with an antecedent car, question in my voice, so that they'd say car, or hold it up so that they'd say not car. But I would teach not very specifically and I would first start it with a known item as the item, and items that share critical attributes as the not items. Okay? All right. Michelle, I'm going to let you mark that as answered if you think I answered it well enough. Right? All right. Is it possible to discuss the learner's prerequisite skills, verbal competencies for this concept training? Yes. All right. I did a lot of vocal verbal examples. Everything that I've talked about could be done as a listener behavior or as a pointing or selection-based responding, right? So that you could put out 2 items, potentially 3 items, the target item and 2 non-examples that share critical features with the target item and teach them to point. And I would start out with a lot, and this is something that could be researched. This is something that I have learned from my own experience, but I don't have data on this, so take this with a grain of salt. But I would start out with a lot, if you're doing 3 items, 1 example, 2 non-examples, and you're sticking with car versus bicycle and a tricycle, or car versus, not boat, boat's too far out. But I would do a lot more trials with car, with the correct, starting out if you're doing, I don't know, 10, I don't know if you're doing rate-based, whatever it may be. And then I would fade in more non-examples. But that's an empirical question. I'd love to see somebody do some research on that. So, Elena, you can mark whether or not that's answered, and we can come back if not. Oh, confusing numerals, 13 versus 30. Okay. What do you suggest is using an example of 13 versus not 13? I'm going to put that out to the group because that is a great question. I know what I would start out with, but let's put out to the group in the chat. What might you start if you were going to focus on 13 examples versus not? I love it. Who's Trish? Yes, I would have done the same thing. I'd start with a 3 as an example and a 1. Right? As a non-example. So again, you're looking at those shared critical features, maybe 18, okay? But I will say, 18 because it shares some of those features, an 8 with a 3, things like that. I will say 13 versus 31 is really hard. And we have to teach or ensure that sequencing, order sequence is a prerequisite skill before we really try to drill in between 13 and 31. And there are ways, not with using the numbers 1, 3, and 3, 1. There are other more tangible ways to teach sequence. Right? Right? Excellent, excellent responses. So Sarah, you get to mark if that's answered. Oh, would the child start saying not dog when it's time to label cat? Maybe, right? Because you've only done cat maybe once or twice as not dog, because you have horse as not dog, you have elephant as not dog, you have buffalo as not dog, right? So they might only have 1 or 2 trials, not dog, when they have cat, right? Even if you can quickly switch it over when you start to teach cat and the things that are not cat, right? So try it out and then see where the problems are in your instructional sequence. That is a testing opportunity, a testing of your own teaching, where the confusion may lie. Because all of this tells you exactly where the quote-unquote faulty stimulus control is. Because they're always labeling what they're under the control of the stimuli. Ooh, Daniel, why do we think DI is still so unpopular? Well, part of it, of course, is historical and this unfortunate knee-jerk reaction to capital DI, to direct instruction. I'm not gonna, that is people have written books and many articles answering that question, but I'm gonna leave you, Daniel, and the whole group with another teaser, because Dr. Bill Heward and I have been working on 2 special sections. So a special section in Perspectives on Behavior Analysis, Behavior Science, that journal, and Behavior Analysis and Practice. In September, we have 2 special sections on direct instruction being published. And one of those articles talk about the popularity or the relative adaptation. Is that how it's said? Adaptation? Anyway, how often folks adopt DI curriculum. So look for Behavior Analysis and Practice and Perspectives on Behavior Science in September. We'll answer some of those questions with some of those articles. So Daniel gets to answer that. And folks, go ahead, Catherine.
Oh, no, I didn't have any questions for you, Janet. I was just going to say that I think that's all of the questions actually answered. I've been marking them answered as we've been going. So if nobody else has any more questions, thank you so much. That was brilliant. And I noticed you got some nice comments about the format of your slides as well. They're very pretty.
Good, good. And hopefully the examples helped convey some of what we're trying to teach. So thank you.
The interactivity in your presentation was brilliant, Janet. Thank you. And we are just so pleased to have you, and we have your talk recorded for the Centre for Behaviour Analysis as well. So thank you very, very much. And for everyone else, I hope to see you all at our next talks. We have Evelyn Gould's next month. So looking forward to seeing you all there. And thank you, Janet.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you very much. And best to everyone. Everyone stay safe. And we hope to see everyone together someday soon.
Fingers crossed.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.